Hey everybody, it's Robot here from Vespa Motorsport and ScooterWest.com. If you followed my channel for all the years, I don't know, it's probably about 4 years worth of videos I've been covering this bike. So starting about 3.5, 4 years ago, I started building it. About 2 years ago, I finished it and really haven't featured it ever again in any of the videos. But I ride it around a little bit. I got plenty of other scooters and motorcycles to ride, so it's just another scooter that I use mainly on a Sunday fun day. And I'll share some of the photos of the place I ride it. Mostly just ride with friends around locally. Haven't really taken it out anywhere. Well, now the scooter's got about 700 miles and I figure it's time to do an oil change on it. Typically with these 150cc Sprints and Primaveras, or pretty much the whole Vespa and Piaggio line, they recommend a first service at 625 miles. It's got about 700 miles on the performance engine setup. Typically in a first service, you'd change the gear oil, the engine oil, and you'd also check and adjust the valves if needed. Check the spark plug, adjust your throttle, free play. If you have the owner's manual with your scooter, it has a service chart and it kind of outlines the recommended work. And if the scooter's still under the factory warranty, you certainly need to perform the service as per what the factory recommends and not deviate from that. And typically I just recommend taking it to your local dealer. Support your dealer if you don't want to tackle something like this yourself. But today I'll show how to do the oil change. I'll flash some kind of cool photos of stuff I've done with this scooter. In the past I've covered changing the oil on these. It's not exactly that fun to do on this scooter. They got a very small filter spout to fill up the oil. And I'll skip the valve adjustment. I've covered that in a past video. You can just search for Primavera Sprint valve adjustment, 3-valve engine. Motor's all hopped up with the Malosi kit. I ride it pretty hard. The last trip I did with this scooter before it came here was about 25 miles on the freeway because I had to get somewhere real quick. So I'm kind of curious to see how the oil level is. About 700 miles. Cylinder kits, whenever you have a performance engine, you need to certainly check it more frequently. So it's on the center stand. That's always the best way to check it. Unthread your dipstick on the right side. Pretty much same dipstick as found on the HPE 300, it's a very long one. Wipe it off and you see that crosshatch right there. I'm going to go ahead and dip the dipstick and thread it all the way back in. And I'll have it back out. And survey says, I bet you it's going to be low because I ride this thing hard and haven't checked it in a while. Yep, it's certainly low, but it's not dangerously low. A little bit on the tip. So that's kind of the minimum amount of oil you'd want to run in the motor. The maximum would be oil that's all the way up here. So if you had the glossy oil all the way up here, that's correct. If you're higher, that's dangerous and causes problems and oil leaks. If the dipstick comes out bone dry, that's certainly dangerous as well. So perfect time to change it. Put full synthetic. I'm going to go to the Multiple 3000V or 300V full synthetic 5W40 ester-based synthetic oil. It's always good to have more than one quart because they take a little bit more. In addition, I'm going to change the gearbox oil because the gearbox was completely swapped over when I did the disc brake rear end conversion about 700 miles ago. So it's got fresh gears in there. I want to get the contaminants out and put full synthetic gear oil. We have the Multiple full synthetic gear oil. It's one of the large liter size bottles. But if you're just looking to do one change and want the convenience of being able to squirt it in, we have this alternative from Genuine Scooters. It's a full synthetic gear oil that's compatible. You know, the weight range is compatible with the Vespa, and we have these available. And the nice thing is you can reuse the bottle. It works perfect for squirting the gear oil into it. I'll go with the aftermarket oil filter. You see my recent video of reviewing the various oil filters, original Piaggio to a Malosi. Give you some of these part numbers. So Oil Gear Dash Mini, I'm just going to have 2 of those on hand. And Oil 5W40S, which is the Multiple full synthetic oil. Got the oil filter. That's the aftermarket but higher quality oil filter. Works perfectly good. It's got the nut on the end. It's nice and easy to use. 483727. And I got an O-ring somewhere 285 Look in the description, the partner, the O-ring for the oil drain, and then there's crush washers for your oil fill and oil drain for the gearbox, which is 000397. You'll need 2 of those. So let's just jump right into it. And the easiest way to drain the oil is either put a zip tie on the grip and lean it up against the wall, or have something like a lift and take it off the center stand, because the problem is when you drain the engine oil and pull the oil filter, it drips all over the center stand. So it's best to be set up for success before you jump into doing a job. Have all the tools you need on hand. Like I said, I'm doing it the more advanced way, where I'm gonna keep the scooter off the center stand. I have it clamped in the front. We're soon gonna have Vespa Motorsport branded jack stands. They're coming pretty soon. They're on the water right now. They're a nice high quality one. I've checked out several of them. This is a K&L one, which is very, very expensive. But we have one with a very large pad coming. So look out for that. It's gonna be very affordable. And I think you've seen several of my videos. If you watch my past videos, I typically use these stands all the time on any of the scooters. They're just very handy to have. So I'm pretty much gonna get the rear tire up in the air. And kind of cheat with the power tool there. Take off the drain bolt on a modern Vespa, 24 millimeter. You can use a combination wrench or a socket, but it's got limited clearance. So I highly recommend, if you're gonna keep a Vespa, have one of these big 24 millimeter wrenches on hand. There's the oil filter T, which is a standard like cross slotted oil filter. That's the one that's on here, but I'm using the easier to use oil filter with a nut, and you can just have a 17 millimeter nut. It's a nice form nut, and this will work perfect to do that. So 17 millimeter wrench. Changing the gear oil, you're gonna need a 6 millimeter Allen socket. And a destructive way to remove an oil filter, an old one, is you can use something like channel locks. Very helpful tool. You're not gonna take an oil spout that's this big and pour it into that little dipstick. I highly recommend having a specific funnel. This is the Redline oil funnels that we sell on our website. I think it's Tool Funnel, a very popular oil funnel, and it happens to line up just nice for the fill spout on these scooters here. And another handy thing, if you're not going to drain it into like a standard tin, the oil pans, Tool, I think it's Tool oil pan. Again, look in the description, you see all these products at scooterwest.com. And the clearance is a little bit limited with this pipe I have on here. So it's not too tight. You don't want to have these over tightened. And there you go. So just took a couple little hits to get that loose. You'll be able to spin the drain bolt right off. And this is pretty standard across the whole Vespa and many of the Piaggio range scooters. It's a big drain bolt, and it's gonna have a strainer in there as well. So you can see the oil. It's a winter day here in California. It's probably like 60 something degrees here in the service department. Pull the old O-ring off before you forget. You don't want to end up with 2 O-rings on there. Then pull the screen out. And I'm getting a little dirty with this. Typically, you could do that with a needle nose. It's a brand new cylinder kit, and it's got some crud on there. You can see there's crud on that filter. And that's pretty typical if you have a brand new build. There's going to be some crud. Typically, you should see very little crud or debris kind of have on this filter. And you can clean this with brake parts cleaner before you put it back in. So I'll go ahead and clean that, spray it off. You can even wash it in a sink with soap if you had to. That would do the trick. Next, we'll destructively move the old oil filter here. So just take a channel locks, and you can just go around the filter and squeeze into it and go ahead and loosen that filter. And we'll let that sit there for a while, drain. Since it's cold oil, it's not all that quick. If you do this job when it's hot, you could do the whole job very quickly, because oil drains out rather fast when it's... So while the engine oil is still draining out, this oil pan's long enough that we can also drain the gearbox oil out as well. So directly underneath this round cap, or if it's a rectangular cap on the newer iJet motor, it's in the exact same spot. This is your gearbox oil. And it looks really clean in there, but we'll go ahead and drain that out. And right here is where the fill is located on these 3-valve Primavera and Sprint 150cc motors, or even a 125 if you're in other markets. Gonna pull that off, get rid of that crush washer. Don't want to leave it behind the old one, just discard. And both those Allen bolts are identical, so they can be interchanged between the two. So we're gonna go ahead and refill this hub. The total capacity of this hub is around 270 cc's, and when you refill it, drain it, refill, I find it takes about 1/4 of a liter, so around 250 cc's. This is a tiny bit under that with a pair of these, but it's within the safe amount. If you want nice convenient bottles, alternatively you just buy the bigger bottle and pretty much get 4 gear oil changes out of them. So if you buy the full liter of the Gearbox oil. So go ahead and put new crush washers. Those are those 000397 crush washers. Make sure both the bolts are clean. And you can just see it's just dripping a little bit. And if you're curious and want to torque this, about 15 foot-pounds is all you need to do. I'm just going to do about enough to where it seats the crush washer, wipe any excess that's on the motor. So if you're going to fill it right to the maximum capacity, pretty much when it's dripping out of the fill hole, that's about as high as you want to go with this. So just add it a little bit at a time if you're not measuring it. You know, if I go too high, you know, there it is. That's probably right at the correct capacity. See how it's dripping out? If it's running out, that's definitely too high, and you want to let it drain out until it's just a steady occasional drip. See how I wipe it away and there's going to be one more drip forming. So that's the maximum capacity of the gear oil, but pretty much 1/4 of a liter is close enough. You don't need to get it too exact. Don't want to have it overfilled and don't want to have it like half capacity. So put that in there, and I have the new crush washer, and I didn't really show that, but put that on, and the Gearbox oil is all changed. So I got the strainer all clean. Make sure that O-ring's still in good shape. If there's anything wrong with this or there's a tear in it, they're very inexpensive. I just recommend replacing it. We always have these available at Scooter West. So it's just down to where it's just giving an occasional drip. That's plenty of the old oil drained out, so put that strainer in there. And before you put this oil drain cap on, put a new O-ring in there. So I cleaned it off and kind of got the oil in there. O-ring seating in there isn't like out of the groove, because if it's not quite seated right, you'll pinch it and it will just destroy the O-ring, and it's not gonna have a leak right here. So thread that on by hand. And there's a specific torque to this, but main thing is just because it's 24mm doesn't mean you need to tighten it a whole bunch. So pretty much the O-ring seated at that point, and you kind of got to have and that's all it needs, just a little bit. You know, just give it a little snug, and that's all you need to do. You don't want to crank on that too hard, just enough where it fully seats the O-ring. Then use, you know, I like these disposable rags, pretty handy for just wiping up any residual oil in this oil filter cavity. Kind of get that all out of here, just because if you have anything left in there, sometimes it will drip. And typically I don't really recommend filling these. These filters are nice, they already got an oiled O-ring on there. Go ahead and thread that on by hand. And we'll get the 17mm wrench. And again, I would just recommend doing it right there. That's about as, you just feel it just get ever so, not where it first hits the rubber where you have friction, but right when it gets much tighter, that's as far as you want to go. You don't want to crank it any further, because then you'll over pressure the seal, the O-ring seal that's on these oil filters. So your old oil, you could dispose of that at like an auto parts store or some hazmat recycling center thing, whatever you might have in your area. So before I fill it, you want to have the scooter level and on the center stand. So it's kind of easy to do since I got the jack stand. I'll go ahead and lower this. And the total capacity or typical change capacity with a fresh oil filter is like, I think it's 1,340 cc's or milliliters, 1,340 milliliters. So it takes a little bit more than 1 liter and definitely more than 1 quart, but not 1.5. So get an oil filter like this. And I'm not gonna watch, I'm just gonna go ahead and pour the full liter in it first. Kind of watch that you don't overflow the funnel because it goes down it very slowly. It's like watching paint dry. Alternatively, if you're looking to have enough oil for 3 oil changes on a Vespa, you could certainly buy the whole 4-liter bottle and you save a little bit of money. We have these available on scooterwest.com. I would say the Modal 300V is kind of like the highest end, best oil for a kitted out scooter such as this one. It's got an air-cooled motor. It's got a cylinder kit. Definitely runs a little hotter than a stock motor, and I tend to ride it pretty hard. I'm going to add the last little bit, like about a quarter of a liter. And we'll start the motor, let it warm up a little bit, and then we'll kind of do the final top off. So got the dipstick in, very important. If you start the scooter without it, it will blow a lot of your oil all over the place. You want to take a look at your oil light and watch it extinguish after a few seconds of startup. And oftentimes the motor quiets up right when the oil starts circulating. So I let it run for about 30 seconds. So watch out for your knuckles on the pipe, even run it for 30 seconds, enough to heat up the header of the muffler. Pull your dipstick out. It's on a level surface. When you check that, check the oil level on the center stand. Sometimes you'll get a false reading. You want to let it sit for about a minute. Let the oil drop into the sump of the motor. So oftentimes when you dip it right in the first time, there's a lot of oil in the tube and it will kind of stick to the dipstick. So that's why you want to let it settle for a moment. And it certainly needs a lot more. We're about right there. This multiple oil's kind of got a fluorescent tint to it, so it's pretty easy to see. And you don't need to be that accurate with it. Just like, okay, pour, you know, that was about 200 cc's of oil is what I'm guessing to bring the dipstick from kind of the quarter mark to the full mark. So allow that to settle. And again, I'll kind of show you, since we just poured oil right down the fill hole, oftentimes you just stick that in, it will stick all over the place to the dipstick and give you a false reading. So allow it to settle and go back into the engine here. And there we go, very close to the top. That's more than satisfactory. So we're all set, put the dipstick in. Something else you may want to consider, if the scooter is more than 2 years old, you might want to flush the brake fluid, especially if the scooter's left outside or something. So thanks for watching. That pretty much just sums up how to do an oil change. Pretty much some of the first service, or even every 3,000 miles, I just recommend changing your engine oil. Gearbox oil can go much further. Typically you change the gearbox oil the first time, then it can even go as far as 12,000 miles with full synthetic oil. Don't need to check your gearbox oil level, because if you see an external leak, well then you know the level might be low. It doesn't lose any of the oil like the engine oil is. So to keep that in mind, I know some people want to check their gearbox oil. You know, no need to really do that unless you're just verifying somebody else's technique on changing it. I've seen them severely overfilled. That causes problems and leakage. But that's pretty much how you do it. I've kind of covered this in the past. I thought I'd just share doing it on my own bike with some of the photos of what I've done with my scooter in the last 2 years. Hope you think that's kind of fun. Until next time, it's Robot here from Vespa Motorsport and ScooterWest.com. You can look back at the old archive of videos and watch the build of the scooter. I think I have 4 videos that are up, we'll be putting it together. Most of it's in the art of that somebody else did. Manny did all this cool art, and it's just a Sprint. It's got some fun stuff bolted on and some other easy to do customizations. A couple hard ones like the electrical ones. But thanks for watching. Don't really share too many of my own scooters or doing service on them. Until next time, it's Robot here, scooterwest.com and Vespa Motorsport. Keep in mind you can look in the description of this video for all the products and tools used in this video.